Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in tonight on this wild and windy evening. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everybody's keeping safe. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rupert Kaplar, branch chairman of the Western branch. So welcome to our first Zoom meeting of the year, where Chris Biddle has well, I've forgotten what to say there, but yes, it gladly is offered to give a talk tonight on entitled "Never a Dull Moment" about his life and times in agricultural engineering. So, from what I've seen of the preview last week when we did a dry run, it looks very interesting, and I think I will hand over to you now, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I will just lock this up and excuse the rather geeky photograph, which was taken in Germany some years ago. You'll notice it was taken some years ago for the lack of wrinkles, but also probably because I've got a Filofax in my hand. But anyway, it's really good to be with you tonight. What I thought I'd do, and I'm going to try and compress 60 years, because in 1961 I joined Ford Motor Company tractor division, and 60 years into 30 minutes. So quickly, just give you a little bit of my background, look at the industry trade publications, something about Lordgy magazines, which I was involved with for about 30 years. My experiences, really pleasurable experiences with Landwards, and then some odd instances during the publishing times. And lastly, just a little bit of few thoughts on how to grab the attention of readers. So my father was brought up on this farm, in the middle of this farm somewhere, which is in Somerset, a little hamlet called Boltonsborough near West Pennard, but where my grandfather farmed. My father was brought up on there, and had he still lived there, each summer he would have found his fields rather crowded because it overlapped onto the Glastonbury Festival site. But he wouldn't have known anything about that. My grandfather on the other, on my mother's side, was a cheese grader. He worked for a cheese factor in Wells in Somerset, and he went round the country grading all the cheddar cheese. My father got a job working for Vacker, the milking machine people, and this is a picture of him I came across at a Great Yorkshire Show in 1931. But soon he was poached, and he was poached by International Harvester to join their milking machine division. And this was a copy of his agreement in 1934, when he was going to be paid £3 a week. And there was actually a clause in here, if you can see, that he was to furnish a surety, a bond of £200 in 1934. Whether that was because he was likely to run off with a company car, I don't know, but I don't think there was every action. But there was the termination in those days of 7 days. That's all. I was educated at Salisbury Cathedral School and King's School Bruton, and then didn't go to university. I went to Salisbury College of Education, where, in his wisdom, my father decided to put me on a course, a one-year engineering and technical drawing course, and also following year a commerce course for shorthand and typing, which was an interesting experience for somebody who'd been at a single-sex school for all those years, because there were 16 in the class, 15 girls and me. So I did learn quite a lot about typing and shorthand and stuff. My father then joined a company called a brewing company based in Wilton. He he got taken there or invited to join by Mr. Sherry, who is his sales manager at International Harvester, who had bought into this dealership, a brewing company, which was founded in 1860 as after a blacksmith, Albert Brewer. And he joined that company in around about 1940. And so you can see that there was a centenary dinner. And one of the reasons I show this is that one of our customers, and he was one of the speakers at the centenary dinner, was A.G. Street. And many people of an older vintage like myself will remember him. He was a regular on Any Questions, on the Brains Trust, also a prolific writer and contributor to national newspapers. And one of his main books, published back in 32, was reprinted yet again this year in 2020. I then, after college, the idea was to go into agricultural engineering, but I joined Ford Motor Company, working at Boreham House, Chelmsford. A magnificent, it's not like a training centre, well, not like many training centres. It was a magnificent house with a big lake in front. And in 1962, we'd done some in the UK called farming fairs, Kilmarnock, Blagdon Lake, I remember, in February, which was Parky living in a caravan. We went to Spain for several months on what they called a farming fair. And so there were four of us who were going down there. There was myself, I was the youngest, and actually I wasn't old enough to drive to Dover. I was only 19 at the time, so we had to get somebody else to drive the truck to Dover, at which point they loaded it on it wasn't Sea Link in those days, but the ferry, and got to the other side, and they waved me goodbye, off you go sunshine, and on down through France into Spain. And it was a whole tour where we actually toured up, got together with the Spanish distributor called Ed Bro, and we ran these farming demonstrations throughout the year. Now, I've got a small 2-minute film that I took, or an extract of a film, which shows you some of the features of what we got up to. As I said, it's just over 2 minutes and with extremely cheesy music. Let me, if I can find my thing again. One of the features was a driverless tractor, would you believe? And the team was led by Arthur Patel, who spent many years with roadless traction. And this was the site of our first demonstration at Albacete. The feature had this reversible plough, which we did ploughing demonstrations with. And in order to drum up interest, we used to take it into town on a quiet Sunday, sit at a bar, I think that one behind, have a beer, and then slowly start the tractor up and run it round the square, where initially there was very few people around. and then he'd put his foot down and drop the cultivator at speed. So when I came back from Ford, I joined a brewer and company, and actually I came back in the winter of 1962. And those of you who long enough memories are around at that time will remember the winter of 1962-63. We had a branch in Somerset at Glastonbury at the time, which in their wisdom they decided to close, and it was my job to take a lorry every day from about January to March on packed snow from Wilton, where we were based, to Glastonbury, bringing all the kit back. I then spent a long time, several years as a farm machinery rep based at Wilton, and later ran the company's grass machinery branch in Salisbury, and during which time we imported and distributed a range of mowers from Australia, which gave me a chance to a couple of trips over there. This was taken in mid-70s. I'm in the geek in the kipper tie, something about fourth from the right in the front. I'll go into that quickly. In the early 80s, A Brewer bought Dorset Tractors, which had three branches had gone into liquidation. We were at Wilton, and the branches were at Dorchester, Yeovil, and Honiton, which was quite an interesting issue because those of you who know the geography, they're almost in a direct line down. So we had Wilton as a Ford main dealer, then Stanley Pond at Blandford, and then Brewers again at Dorchester, and then Yeovil and Honiton. And I became managing director of A Brewer and Company then. It was a family company, and my father had been chairman and managing director for 25, 30, 40 years. But he never had a majority shareholding. And so the controlling family decided they wanted to go it alone, and it was actually sold subsequently to C&O Tractors. But I left the company in 1986. And at the time we had a guest house in Weymouth. So with Trish, my wife, we ran that for a couple of years, but I was kind of getting itchy feet to do something. But during my time at Brewers, I was vice president of BAGMA and also chairman of the Ford Tractor Dealers Association. As far as BAGMA was concerned, I was just about to be elected president. But quite frankly, my colleagues in the business said, look, I'm not sure you've got time to do it, because it's a fairly full-time job. And it's a real understanding about the amount of commitment people have to give to jobs like that when they've still got a full-time role. So, as I said, actually, when I was young, I always, funny enough, wanted to be a journalist. And when I got back from Spain, I wrote my first published article, and that was in the Farm Implement and Machinery Review of 1963. And it was a 2 or 3 page article, which was reprinted. And this was Farm Implement Review, a magnificent magazine, actually edited again by Jim Priest. And Jim Priest and A.G. Street, that you saw in an earlier photograph, were real inspirations to me on writing and give me tips and encouragement. So I did quite a lot of writing, freelance writing for various publications. But I mean, in later years, when I was publishing my own magazine, this was from the Farm Implement Review, the Smithfield pre-Smithfield issue of 1965. And it used to make me weep to see the amount of advertisers they had. If you counted up, there's about 120 advertisers. There were other magazines, of course, Power Farming, AMJ, and also Richard Lee. I haven't got a copy of this one. Tractor Trader was around for some time. And of course, Norman Stuckey, on behalf of BAGMA, was producing AGM service from the headquarters at Rickmansworth. And the cover on the right is I think one of my favorite ones. It shows a guy mowing with an ATCO in a suit and tie, the 18th green at St Andrews. I think that's really a picture of the times. So I really decided that there wasn't a magazine. I was quite interested. I've been in the grass machinery business. There wasn't a specialist magazine for that. So I gradually got things together and started to produce some copy. And in April '88, I just went round to my local printer with a whole sheaf of papers and kind of said, look, can you turn these into a magazine for me? And they literally were a load of photographs and copy and so on. And so this was the first issue of what was then called Garden Machinery Retailer, published in 1988. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do was to not necessarily have a gossip column, but there were always snippets of news that we were hearing that we wanted to put into an end part, and finally. So we got this guy, Jim Green, who exactly we didn't get him. He was a Letraset. Anybody who remembers Letraset was an imaging stuff that used to rub on and get images off. And we wanted to call him something. So we called him something anodyne like Jim, and Green for grass was probably a thing. So he was in the very first issue. I'll come back to him in a minute. And by 1992, we had started to branch out and get into organising conferences. This was one that we held in London. 1992 was entering into the single market. We held one on the single market where our main speaker was a guy called Victor D'Alessio, who is the managing director of an Italian mower manufacturer called IKEA. IKEA, Freudian slip, IBEA. And also Nick Court, who was an Englishman who had a business. He was the distributor for Mankfield mowers in northern France. He lived in northern France. So they had quite a good perspective on what faced us in the early 90s. In 1990 also, the industry set up its own show in competition to Saltex, which had moved to Peterborough. And it went to Kempton Park. It was the only one-off event, as it turned out. But one of the things I decided to do, not sure foolishly, but we did it, was produce a show daily. It was a 16-page magazine where we would change the front page each day for... so what it actually meant, and you've got to remember that the internet had only just been really invented around about then, 89, 90. There were no digital cameras. So I was doing the copy as we left the show, writing it up in the press room, taking the photographs, getting them into a 1-hour developing place, driving back from Kempton Park to Salisbury, dropping them into the printers who put them all together. They were only doing the outside 4 pages, actually, the outside cover, the sort of 4 pages of news, and the rest of the 16 pages were standard. And then they would courier them up to Kempton Park for distribution the following morning. It was great fun, but I wouldn't do it again. We changed the magazine then to lawn and garden equipment. As you see, it was a time when there was a lot of focus on ransoms at the time. There was the one company, particularly in the grass machinery business, that were quoted on the stock exchange, and there was always great interest what their share price. Remember arriving at Saltex one year, and it was 9.5p. And of course, ransoms were eventually taken over, as you say. But even in this one in 2004, we were starting to look at the impact of the internet on business in general. We then decided to produce a magazine for the turf professional market, and launched that in 1988. It did give me a chance to connect with the cricket industry, which was no big hardship. And we also ran awards for that. And the winner of one of the awards, as you can see, was Paul Burgess, who was at the time he had been the groundsman at Arsenal's Highbury ground, but in fact he was there at the Emirates. And when it was exempted, we then presented the trophy to him before a capacity crowd at the Emirates Stadium. It was Arsenal versus Everton, and we actually got a seat sitting with the subs on the bench, which was quite interesting. And there's the picture with Arsene Wenger taking a back seat to myself for once. In 1992, we thought there was an opportunity, because I think Richard Lee had stopped publishing Tractor Trader, to publish a magazine for the farm machinery trade. And it also coincided with the Smithfield show there in 2002. And so we tried to get some really good covers. But as you all know, Royal Smithfield Show, and I do like this, and I know Jeff Burgess is on this call, so these will be familiar territory for him. The 2004 show was to be the final show of Royal Smithfield, regretfully, because it really was an iconic and special event for the industry. But being Earl's Court being built over the Olympic swimming pool, there was a limit to the amount of weight you could put on there with the high weight of combines at the time. One of the special ones actually was in the 2004, on the Bagma stand, they launched a careers project, which was launched by Princess Anne. And there was the industry had raised a fighting fund of nearly £100,000 to set up a careers project for agricultural engineering. And there was a lot of love in the room at that stage. And it went and produced brochures. It also produced a PowerPoint for careers teachers. But of course, PowerPoint and such publications are now no longer as relevant. But also gave us an opportunity to talk to some really interesting people. Many of you from that era will know Jeremy Colclough, who was always good value and one of this industry's characters. But what we found was that a lot of dealers were in both of those industries. They were in agricultural machinery, they were in grass machinery, they were in professional turf care. And we were actually doubling up on a lot of relevant information. So in 2005, we decided to combine lawn and garden equipment with Torque into one universal title, which it has still got today. And I was talking to Steve, who actually joined the company around about that time, and still the editor of Service Dealer. And it literally, it came to us over a coffee one day. Service Dealer says what it does on the tin, or does what it says on the tin. And I still think it's a most apt name. And produced that over the years. And in 2014, I went into partnership with a company called the Ad Plane in Oxfordshire to produce Service Dealer, because it was getting quite hard to produce all those magazines with a staff of about 2 or 3. And they took it on and they really liked it. And Duncan Murray Clark, who came to me out of the blue, he was looking to place advertising for a client. They're an advertising agency, amongst other things. And they actually also published BALPAS, the British Airline Pilots Association magazine at the time, and he wanted to add to his portfolio of magazines, and he took on Service Dealer. I think now he doesn't think that was a bad idea, because the British Airline Pilots Association is fairly quiet at the moment. So and he's certainly done extremely well and done a really good job on Service Dealer. And in 2015 I completed the sale of Service Dealer to Duncan, and I'm still kind of on the fringes. I'm a correspondent without portfolio, I guess. And earlier than that, Chris Wetnell had approached me about producing Landwards. So with Steve and working from our offices in Salisbury, we had taken on Landwards in 2008. And as you know, it was produced by Brian Whitney, and he I'm not sure all the politics of it, but anyway, his contract finished and we took it up and produced the first issue, a spring issue in spring 2008, with, I suppose, inevitably Mr. Motivator, we called him, Richard Trevarthen, on the front cover. I'm sorry, Richard Robinson, you were on cover number 2, but I've only got room for 1. It's been, I really did enjoy Landwards, because from a fairly narrow confines of producing for the agricultural machinery and grass machinery, here was an opportunity to really expand into a much wider area. And one of my favorite ones was the one on the left, which is which was Clothier's farm down at White Champfire, which, funny enough, I had been to as a kid of about 8 or 9 with my grandfather grading cheese when he was working for the Milk Marketing Board. So this industry does have a habit of what goes round goes round. And not only that, it was near where I went to school as well. And they are, of course, the manufacturer of the White Farms cheese brand, an extremely well-known company and now. And obviously also robotic tractors were coming up. We wanted to produce a front cover that depicted that. We didn't want to show a current UK tractor, not even the green one, Peter Leach. So that tractor is some anodyne Russian tractor, which my artist actually then incorporated one of the early machines from Small Robot. I think one of the landmark occasions was the 80th anniversary of Landwards at Rest Park, with all its historical connections with FIAgrE. And that, I thought that was a wonderful occasion, with the presentation of the awards, and one to John Kilgore, the late John Kilgore's family, and one to today's chairman, obviously. But that really was a wonderful occasion. And it gave us a chance to get this iconic photograph of 12 presidents. Well, there were 12 presidents at the meeting, but Reg Norman had left early, of 12 presidents all together. And that was probably a unique occasion, which would be very, very difficult to replicate today. And I then decided that as I was kind of retiring, I wanted to step down at the end of 2019. And the cover on the left was my final issue after 12 years, very enjoyable years. I met some brilliant people. And gosh, what I learned was just unbelievable. And of course, Andy Newbold has taken it on with a nice looking front cover. And is doing a good job. And albeit I really do feel sorry for him, because I gave up in the winter of 2019. And of course, as we all know, it went rather pear-shaped in the few months of 2020. Also produced a number of other publications, the World of Opportunity brochures in 1 or 2 guises. And recently, on the right, I'd had pleasure of producing a brochure of the UK capability in agri-tech engineering for the Department for International Trade, which I did with AEA, which identified 25 British manufacturers, and it put lie to that often heard phrase, "We don't make anything in this country any longer." So, I mean, obviously, there's been quite a few things that I've got involved in, particularly in magazines. And if I could just look at 1 or 2 of those, whilst I was editor of Service Dealer, got invited by BBC Watchdog to go and cover and be a judge on the test of lawnmowers. Well, now, you can't really see this properly, but they had 5 lawnmowers on test, and it ranged at the very top from something like an Atco Royale fine turf lawnmower costing about £1,200, down to a Flymo, and just above that a Corecast Concord costing about 20 quid. So how on earth you can come up with a best buy out of that is anybody's business. And so when I was interviewed for the programme, along with Derek Walder of the IOG, and they asked the direct question, which do you think was best? You can guess that we were unable to give a definitive answer. There was one funny story attached to that, because a few days later, my next door neighbour came rushing out of the house and said to my wife, Trish, she said, I've just seen Chris on the TV. And it was on Friday night, it was prime time, and there was a pause. And she said, he was talking about lawnmowers. And you said, yeah, that's what he does. Then there was an even longer pause. And she said, I've never seen him cutting the grass. So that was that. Let's go back to Jim Green. We created this character, and people always used to say, because we used to have some quite tasty content in there, I'd like to get my hands on that Jim Green, or I just think, how can we speak? And of course, he didn't exist. But we were running a conference in Nottingham, which we called the National Dealer Day. And I thought to myself, I've really got to get a Jim Green, or get Jim Green to come and host the conference. So I was given a contact, and I went up to London. I went to the Old Vic and met this guy, this actor, and we talked on the stage of the Old Vic. He was a character actor. He'd been in a lot of the soaps like The Bill and so on. And anyway, we briefed him, and he came along and he presented the conference for us. And of course, one of the things he was able to do, because we were able to give him some names and a little bit of the lowdown and some of the people there, he was able to personalize it. But even after that, and we used this picture actually in subsequent issues of Lawn and Garden Equipment, even after that, people thought that he still existed, and so on. We had a go-kart day with an engine maker who no longer exists, called Tecumseh, where all the trade were lined up and dashing around the track at Kempton Park it was. And this guy kept on flashing past us and really beating everybody in sight. And it wasn't until afterwards we found that the ringer they brought in was David Coulthard. And that was certainly another interesting example. This was a strange one. The fastest lawnmower in the world. They decided to tackle, it was Countax, decided to make an attempt on the world speed record for Land Rovers, another Freudian slip, for lawnmowers, which was to take place at Pendine Sands, which was the site of many speed attempts. And it was driven by Donald Campbell's grandson. And so this souped up edition of the Countax still had to prove to the Guinness Book of Records that it could actually cut grass. And so it was on the top there, and I had to prove to them that it was actually a lawnmower and not just a souped up piece of kit. And it did a measured run. We had to wait for the tide to go out. We then had to pick up all the stones off the beach, and then there was a measured mile. And on the second run, it topped 100 miles an hour in the measured run, and for a short while was the fastest lawnmower, but it has since been beaten. Another interesting trip was the trip to the Valtra factory in Finland. You can see the tractor's been transported from the factory. I didn't take the top shot, but it does show the remoteness of the Valtra factory. And it was the one time I got to interview Martin Hagen, sat in a teepee in the snow, sat around a fire eating whatever they eat in Finland. And there were other very interesting times. The transatlantic dealer debate that we ran, where we put a team of UK dealers and US dealers and had a debate at the expo show at Louisville. I went to Israel for the launch of a robotic mower by a company from over there, to Phoenix, Arizona for the Deer Parts Expo, and to Iowa for a trip to the fabled Waterloo tractor factory, and an interesting trip with Jeremy Colclough for a demonstration of Hivar cultivation equipment on Jutland on a bitterly cold day when everybody had to take a slug of what they call gammeldansk, which is a revolting drink, quite high alcohol content, which I can only equate to tasting like liquid fisherman's friend. I also wrote a book. The Budding Legacy was about the invention of the lawnmower, Edwin Budding, in 1830. And in order to publicize that, I got a blue plaque made. The government had finished the blue plaque scheme itself, but we got one made, and it was displayed on the site of his old workshop, which was being razed to the ground. It was an old mill in Stroud in Gloucestershire, but was now rather handily Stroud Brewery. So we had this launch at Stroud Brewery. There's a replica of Budding's mower on the right, alongside a current Ransom's model. And the opening was done by David Withers, who at the time was president of Ransom's Jacobson in the United States, and he flew over especially from the States for the event. And all through that, we ran awards, and they started very small way, presenting awards in dealers' showrooms. One in 1989. We then still did the UK Dealer of the Year award, which was presented then at Glee, and then moved on to running an actual awards event at the same time as Saltex. And this is in 2008. And that on the left is James Ashworth. Many of you will know, who had a John Deere dealership. Was it John Deere dealership? I'll be put right later. But did start work with John Deere, and is currently working for TH White's. And that was at the Savile Court Hotel in Windsor. And in 2012, I also had a contact. And if those of you remember the presentation, what shall I call it? The introduction ceremony to the Olympics, we managed to get the wild turf that had been used on that set to decorate the set of our awards in 2012. And you can see some of it sprouting with the award winners there. And the subsequent awards, we ran what they call a Heritage Award in 2013 at Saltex. The winner of one was Hans-Peter Steele, Mr. Steele from the Steel Company, and other awards were presented. And they're still going on, except that they've been expanded by Service Dealer and been extremely successful. And this is really the credit of Duncan at the Ad Plane, who has put these on. So now it is the awards and a conference. This was in 2016 when the guest speaker was Adam Henson, and the following year when we had John Timpson, the high street retailer, who was extremely interesting. And so that's just a snapshot of some of the things that we got up to. And lastly, when writing a trade magazine, we are not the enemy, as some people think. We are there to present the news. And I would have to say the industry is not as good at self-promotion as it perhaps ought to be. The trade press is there to support and tell your story, and often the human interest stories, and most particularly in this industry, focus on people who are often forgotten. And there's one thing, when I say get press releases right first time, it has all changed. You would not believe the amount of calls we used to get from a PR agency who had sent us a press release, and the day after, or even 2 days after, had rung us up and said, oh, look, can you disregard that? Don't use it. I've got to change it because my client has asked me to do so. Well, these days, hard luck, sunshine, because that's on it's on the internet within hours of us getting it. And so there is no chance, there's no second chance. And also, we used to get pictures of people standing around a machine, all grinning like Cheshire cats, and all it actually said was, we've sold a machine. But news is our currency. That's what we as journalists trade on. We look for a headline, sometimes something that sums up your company, something that makes you, the reader, read on. And this was one of our favorite headlines that we put in to Lawn and Garden Equipment one year. And really, we want our readers to say, after reading an article, I didn't know that. And please do banish the mission statements. I've had more mission statements thrust at me than the many, many hot dinners. So they don't really cut it with us. So if you are involved in writing anything on behalf of somebody or your company, the golden rule is this: that piece of copy should follow the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. So there we are. That's a quick trawl through 60 years. I'd like to thank all the FIAgrE members and the whole industry for the wonderful support I've had. And of course, it goes without saying, let me get on with it and get on with it. So they've been a tremendous support during the over all those years. And as some of you know, I've given up writing at the moment, and that was then, and this is now, because I'm actually producing a weekly podcast called Inside Agri-Turf. And so this is now, and this is I call it my studio, but that's a bit highfalutin. But this is where I work now. So thank you very much indeed. I've no idea what the time is. I think we've galloped through in the allotted time. So thank you very much. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. That was really interesting. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I was amazed at that, although I'd seen it before last week, that the video of the radio-controlled tractor going around that square in Spain. It just shows how times have changed, hasn't it? You'd have to keep everybody 100 yards back, and you know,
one of the issues with that was that it was quite hot, being the middle of Spain, and the heat was getting at the radio controlled. So we never actually knew when the reversible plough was going to flick over unaided and take out half a dozen young Spaniards.
Times certainly have changed, but no, thank you very much, Chris. Should we go through some questions? There's a few on the chat. I don't know if you can see that, Chris, but
hang on a minute, I'll put the chat up. Yeah.
If
okay.
If each, I think the first one on there would be Alan Plum. So, Alan, do you want to unmute and oh, sorry, no, it's yeah, it's Andrew Cragg's question. Andrew, do you want to unmute and ask Chris personally?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Chris. My question was your fascinating video in Spain showed very briefly a tractor perched precariously on a podium, and I was wondering A, how you kept it there, and B, how you got it there.
No idea. We were there to support the Spanish team from Edbro, who were the Spanish distributors, and they organized all the stage management of those events. They normally took place over a weekend, which also almost coincided with the local feria and the local bullfight. And the dealers often sorry, I digress, but they often sponsored the bullfight as well. And we were pulling dead bulls out of the bull ring with that radio control tractor, much to the disgust of the aficionados. But in answer to your question, no, it was all part of the stage managing, Andrew. I think there was a crane came in, but how on earth it managed to stay there, I don't know, but it was quite impressive, wasn't it? I mean, it really was an eye-catching. But we had the radio control tractor. We had an inflatable cinema tent, like an upturned dinghy, which seated about 150 people. And there was ploughing competitions, and the prize actually in those days was a trip for the winners, for the farming winners, to Smithfield Show. So it really got a lot of interest. But it was like living in a circus, frankly, for several months.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think the next question is from Alan Plom. Do you want to mute, Alan?
Yeah. Okay, hear me all right?
Yeah, I can. Hi, Alan.
Yeah, hiya. Well, firstly, yeah, I mean, amazing, Chris. That all your reminiscences and your mementos and things is quite a collection. And yeah, I made a comment on the previous one. Perhaps I actually, wearing my health and safety hat, I'd probably rather not hear how that tractor was put up there. Actually, it was bad.
Well, you wouldn't also want to hear about the firework maker that who was attached to the tour, who used to make the fireworks on an old bench with a fag hanging out of his mouth for each event.
Yeah, I'm gonna show my face with me laughing at that. Yeah, well, yes, risk assessment back in 1962, perhaps
as you say,
was non-existent. But anyway, all about self-preservation. But great to see. I actually, I mean, we're in my Douglas Bomford hat as well. I must say thank you for all the help that you've given us.
It's a pleasure.
Myself and predecessors, turning our attempts at drafting an article into something worthy of publishing in Landwards, and it's good, all the coverages it's given to our students as well. But coming back to recruitment, and one of the key things obviously we're looking at, I was interested about the fighting fund you mentioned, the 100,000 I think you said was raised.
Yeah, it was.
Leaflets. Was that used for other activities, and how successful was that?
Well, I mean, I wasn't involved in using it. I was only there to sort of report on it. But from what I understand, obviously, it was raised amongst manufacturers, dealers, suppliers who put money into a fund. And interestingly, I was actually talking to somebody from AGCO yesterday, because we were talking about recruitment generally, and there may well be somebody who's closer to our AEA today who's on this call, but I don't think this industry has got any kind of funding at the moment. I mean, the issue is, how do we get in people interested in our industry, and how do we put ourselves around? There is a website now for land-based engineering, but I think we are entering an era where the attention span of people much younger than I is shorter. They're also using technology that was unknown in my early days, and it's all on social media these days. And it does seem to me that it probably needs a very modern approach by somebody or some people to get to the eyes and ears of young people, to tell them about the attractions of a career in agricultural engineering.
I think that's true. If I could just come back on that, I mean, certainly I agree. Starting to make more use of social media itself, and some of us ride on the back of that, and wearing my Douglas Bomford Trust hat as well. But we've a long way to go, and veering off into Instagram and all these strange worlds that probably very few of us actually use. But the potential is there to make use of that. I think that's the route A these days, where they pick up their information.
Well, mind you, if somebody told me a year ago I'd be podcasting, I wouldn't have believed them. I didn't know what it meant. Anyway, there you go.
Well done. Thank you very much. Anyway.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Good to see you.
Yeah, cheers. You too.
Thanks, Alan. I think the next one on there was actually my question, which you sort of slightly answered anyway. It was boring subject, social media, but I just noticed a lot recently that OEMs and maybe dealers themselves, that they do a lot of their own self-promotion on that. And do you see that as a threat to the
well,
trade?
I mean, yeah, if you ran a SWOT analysis on it, I think there would be equal on strengths and weaknesses. And there's no question, over the last few months, a lot of dealers have been using social media techniques that they wouldn't have probably used last year, because they've all got to drive people to their non-existent door at the moment. And obviously, shows are out, demonstrations are out. I mean, it will be very interesting. I see the Doe show is going online very shortly, the end of this month. It'll be very interesting to see how they do it. But I did a podcast with a guy in the States recently, who was telling me about a US dealer that had set up a virtual open day, and the manufacturers took, and he had too much stock, he had too many balers to sell, but he actually ran competitions for people who were on it, and he really got a community spirit going through it. So I think we're learning all the time, and there's no question this is going to be, the more the industry can get involved with social media, and everything that surrounds it, it's got to be a no-no. They've just got to go for it now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think the next one was Mike's. So, Mike, you there?
Yeah. I think there was a question from Gary. I think Gary Connolly as well. At the same. I think mine and Gary's questions is both the same. Really, he's kind of, how do you tailor editorial for both, hard copy magazines and online? So how do you grab the reader's attention if people are going to look at an article and decide whether they're going to read it for longer or not?
And well, they are different mediums, of course, and the print is obviously for the longer read. Generally, is what you take to the loo, and yet, looking at stuff on phones is very much for an instant grab at a piece of news. So you've got much more latitude in writing for a magazine, and you can paint much bigger picture in print, and obviously you've got the opportunity to use more photographs and so on and so forth. And there obviously is a difference. I wouldn't use a news story in print that I would necessarily replicate in social media. It is, you're right, Mike, it is a different medium, and we've got to learn to use it. That's a simple thing, really. And people's attention span is a lot shorter these days, and so we've got to live with that.
No, thanks for the comments. So interesting to hear.
I think on, there's a list of questions on the chat. I think that's it for now, unless anybody else wants to just pipe up and ask Chris a question. Oh,
can I see Jeff there? Jeff, do you bemoan the absence of Royal Smithfield? I can't hear, sorry.
I think you're on.
That's it. I've got myself off mute. The challenges of technology, as you were saying, Chris. Yes, I do bemoan the loss of Smithfield, but it's a long time ago. And as you're saying, the whole scene is changing even more radically now. You talked about Saltex at Windsor, because I got totally involved in moving Saltex into the NEC. And now we're looking at Saltex cancelled. And are we going to be able to run Saltex this year in November 2021? It's an unknown world, and watching the change to online virtual shows, I think it's an area that many of us are going to have to get used to.
Absolutely.
The change of the mix, you faced it through media, with the printed media moving to social media. The show industry is going to have to face the same. Sadly, Smithfield had reached the end of its day. It cost a huge fortune. I remember talking with Alec McKee about the cost of John Deere being there in 2004, when he told me at the show, it was his last show, and it had cost them then £500,000 just for the John Deere stand.
In 2004.
2004. Yeah. And when you were talking then, he said, there are 8,000 farmers who are going to buy new tractors next year, Jeff. I don't need to spend £500,000 to see them. I know every man who's going to buy a combine next year. We won't get them all, but we know everyone there.
Yeah.
It's the change of the whole structure of the industry that spelt the death of Smithfield.
And of course, the size of machinery, getting that through central London these days.
It's an interesting challenge. I love the cartoon that you put up. Yes, yeah. I never actually met the guy who got his £400 fine.
I think, yes, there's another question from Hugh Crabtree. Hugh, do you
hi Hugh. Oh,
Chris.
hi, Hugh. Good.
Hiya. Yeah, did you? I was interested to know whether you'd come across the driverless tractor group at Reading University back in the day.
No, I didn't. No, I hadn't. I quite honestly, I haven't. I mean, in recent times, of course, you've got, and there's a lot of new people like the Small Robot Company coming on stream, and who are actually featured on the One Show I see on Monday.
Yeah.
But the answer, Hugh, is I'm afraid no, I didn't.
No, I'm not entirely surprised because I had some fun teasing Kit about the nothing what you were saying earlier about what goes around comes around. That you showed us that fascinating bit of film with the driverless tractor, the Fordson version. Of course, I think it was an international tractor that was the Reading team's one, but I then found some reference to a much earlier driverless tractor at Reading working at Sonning Farm on the dairy unit there, and I did enjoy teasing Kit about that, telling that about 50 years previously this had all work that had all been done following buried cables in the ground to plough straight lines.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. I think there's a general question from Alan, but yes, certainly with regards hosting more of these Zoom calls to cover the whole country and not just at branch level. Certainly, I don't know, Paul, if you want to add to that.
You don't know.
Yeah, look, I think I understand, and I wasn't involved in the discussion, but I mean, over the autumn, we were limited to a total of 100 people through the FIAgrE Zoom license. But I believe that that's been upped now. So opening it up to a wider audience is, technically, I don't think is an issue anymore, because the reality is we're not going to get more than 120, 30, 40, I wouldn't have thought, at probably any meeting up to and including an annual conference. The issue is really whether the branch wants to keep it a little bit more bijou and self-contained, if you like, from a networking point of view first, because obviously all these meetings being recorded, they're all going on the website live. Excuse me. So people will be able to catch up with them later if they weren't able to attend live, so to speak. Obviously they won't be able to ask questions. In principle, here we are tonight, and the Wrekin branch had their meeting last night, and I'm seeing a lot of the same faces here tonight, and those faces weren't, they're not from the Wrekin branch or from the Western branch, but they're here enjoying an evening. I did enjoy the talk, Chris, by the way, just while I've got the mic.
Thanks, Paul. Much appreciated.
I hadn't realized that our paths nearly crossed in 1976. At the time, I was also in a Ford dealership in the West Country, Ford tractor dealership.
Of course you were.
Only a lot further west. We were actually we were down in Truro at Trumpy's, yeah. If you wanted, because all machines break down at 4:30 in the afternoon, don't they? This is what happens. And in those days, trying to get bits out of the other side of London, if you were in Truro for the next morning, it was well nigh impossible.
Yeah.
And the solution was a man called Roy Orchard, who was parts manager at Wilton, who kept the most phenomenal supply.
He was Mr. Yeah, he was difficult to work with, Roy, because he everything was up in his head. And when you tried to put in automated systems and computerized systems, he didn't like it because everything was up here. And no, he was a great guy.
He pulled me and a lot of other Ford tractor service managers out of the mire.
Yes, I'm sure.
Many occasions.
Yeah. So, anyway, this has been very enjoyable.
Good.
Yes. Yeah. I think we got one more question from Andrew Cragg. Do you want to ask that, Andrew?
Yes, thank you. What do you think were the main barriers to the uptake of that driverless tractor all those years ago? Or actually, wasn't it a serious sort of sales pitch at the time?
No, Andrew, I think it was a gimmick. It had been developed, as Hugh said earlier on. There were one or two universities playing around with it. I don't know. I was quite young. I was a young kid on the block on that particular trip. I was only 19, 20. And so I wasn't really involved in the sourcing of the equipment. The team leader there, you saw, probably mentioned Arthur Patel, who worked for Roadless Traction for many years, was a very laid back individual, and anything that went wrong, he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "All right, we'll get on with it." But I don't know, Andrew, what went around at that time. Or where or how that had been made, but I think the guys at Ford had unearthed it from some university or so.
Thank you. I mean, it's extraordinary that the putative technology existed all those years ago.
Absolutely, yeah.
We actually haven't adopted it in principle, apart from in parts.
Yeah.
Up till today.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning earlier about obviously the regionality and the opportunities for this with Zoom, and a thank you from Southeast, since I'm in Kent.
Oh, well done. Thank you very much. I'm glad you could join us.
Very good. Anyone else with any questions for Chris?
Otherwise, it's my whiskey time.
It's quite.
Yeah, Alan Pom here. Again, perhaps not so much a question directed at Chris, but it'd be a welcome observation to hear how how your podcast is going and how it's reaching people. But I made the point about opening up the meetings and other branches sharing. We're in my other professional body hat, Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, my Chiltern branch. We've grown from having 30, 40, sometimes 60 members coming to our face-to-face meetings in Dunstable once a month, and we've grown to having 300 or 400 people internationally now, sharing that, and a lot of those are new members. And actually, we did a vote today. Our program for the next year, nearly 50% of those on the call were non-members, and we're looking to bring those in. So in terms of a medium for generating interest in what we do, it's got a lot of potential. Anyway, that's the point I'm making.
Well, mine is. I started quite slowly. I did all my sort of learning during the early lockdown in March, April time, and then sort of tentatively put my toe in the water very cautiously for the first few months. I then had to go into hospital, have yet another knee operation, third. I'm running out of knees. In September, so I get a rest. But since then, and somebody said they had listened to the one with David Hart, which got a huge amount of listens. I think currently it's been heard in 19 countries. I know that, and I think we're just about between 800 and 900 unique listeners at the moment and that's in just 2 or 3 months. So yeah, it's building up nicely. But it's non-commercial. I'm not monetizing it. It's just a very enjoyable thing to do.
Good to hear, and well done. Keep it up.
Good, thank you.
Right. If there's no more questions, last chance to put your hand up. Is that Nick putting his hand up, or are you just pressing a button on the? No,
just pressing a button.
Okay. I think in that case, then I'll do a roundup, and then Mike, once done, we can stop the recording. But many thanks, Chris, again for a great talk and question and answer session. I would normally say at the end of a real proper meeting in either Cirencester or Lackham, thank you for coming all this way, but all the way from your office.
Bedroom, yeah.
Same for everybody else, but it's nice to see people from other branches as well on our calls. The next call we have, meeting effectively is our AGM on the 10th of March. But as yet, Mike, we haven't finalised a speaker for that, have we? But we will certainly you know, watch this space. We'll send out the information when we have that organised. But I think I'd like to finish by basically, you know, everyone showing their appreciation to Chris for his presentation tonight. So, you know, if that's possible, you sort of clap by, yes, or do that. Clap by Zoom kind of thing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable, and I apologize for the lack of technical content. I very much work by the proverb that those that can do, those that can't write or talk about it. So there we go. Been a great evening. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.